So on Wednesday, we had a live session where we spoke about Tesla and we did some analysis of the stock. We spoke about the valuation for the business being over $1 trillion, the stock price being over $1,000 a share. And we also spoke a little bit about how the Q3 numbers actually stacked up and how the importance and the ingenuity of Elon meant that despite chip shortages, they were still able to deliver healthy numbers in Q3, and all of that has contributed to where we are right now with the share price in the business. One thing that I mentioned in that live session is the supercharging network. So in this video, I am sat in my Tesla right now at a supercharger, and I'm going to basically give you the reasons why I believe that the supercharging network really is the silver bullet. It is the big USP. It is the one big competitive advantage that it has over rivals. And yes, we can talk about batteries and range, all of that stuff. That's all very well and good, but hear me out. And you can make your own judgment as to whether I'm talking absolute nonsense or whether you actually agree with me or not. In 2012, Elon Musk unveiled the supercharger network. Its aim to solve three key problems.
One is this question of being able to drive long distances conveniently. Then another question is, what do we do about the fact that when electricity is generated, it is generated at a power plant? And so what about this idea that the emissions are just pushed to the power plant? The third is, well, what about the cost of electric vehicles? How do you compare the cost of electric vehicles with the cost of gasoline vehicles?
I think it's fair to say that when most people think about buying an electric vehicle, I was one of them, the first thing that you think about is, well, how do I know that I'm going to have enough range for the mileage that I tend to do on a day-to-day basis? When I bought this car all these years ago, I was doing a lot of miles. I was doing probably 50, 60,000 miles a year at that point in time. So for me, being able to charge the car and not run out of range was really high on my agenda. Now, I've had this car for 6 years, almost going on 7 years now. And the reality is this car is, I guess, pretty outdated at this point in time. Top range when I got it was 242,000, I wish, 242 miles per charge. Realistically, in real world, I probably get about 200 or so because I'm quite heavy-footed. Now with the car and the miles that I've got on the car, I've got over 130,000 miles on this car right now. It still goes great guns. It still works perfectly. But now on a full charge, I get around about 225 miles on a full tank. So the car works fine and the battery technology is great. It's sustainable, but charging is a big component.
Tesla now have a global supercharging network of over 25,000 superchargers. That means that you can travel and you can charge up to 200 miles in merely 15 minutes, a lot quicker than the car that I'm sat in right now. These new cars have got new technology. The V3 charging rates are absolutely humongous. You're able to put so much more energy into the battery very, very quickly for usage on the road. You compare this to 2019, they only had 12,500 superchargers. So essentially, in 2 years, they have doubled the size of their global supercharging network. And Elon has done this for a reason, to cement Tesla as the leaders in the EV race.
There are lots of competitors coming into the market. VW, as I mentioned in the live on Wednesday, is probably their biggest competitor globally now. They have a good share of the EV market. And you do have the likes of BMW, Audi, Mercedes, big brands like established car manufacturers now coming into the EV space. And when you're investing in Tesla, what you are relying on is that they will continue to have a large lion's share of the global market. The global market by 2027 for the EV industry is forecasted to be worth $802 billion. Now, I've had this car for a very long time, and 2 years ago, I actually did a trip from here all the way to Stelvio Pass. We went through Germany, Belgium, we went through Liechtenstein, we went through Switzerland, we went through Italy, obviously, and we supercharged the entire way there. Well, I supercharged the entire way there, which meant that my total fuel bill was Zero. And I think this is really, really important to acknowledge when you think about the competition that is coming along for Tesla right now. One of the big things that is often labeled against Tesla is build quality. Now, this is one of the older vehicles, and I don't know whether you can see this, but I can fit my finger through this gap, this panel gap right here. These things have been improved in some of the new cars with Tesla. And with the improvements to the interior, there have also been improvements to the range of these batteries. But nevertheless, regardless of whether you have 300 miles or you're able to do 400 miles, what they often say on the sticker is not often what translates to real life. So as I've already said, this car, at the moment, I'm probably getting about 222 miles per charge, but because I drive quite quickly and I've got a heavy foot, I get about 200, maybe 190 most days when I'm driving around. So I have to factor that in, which means that when I'm doing a long trip, I have to factor in my charging. And that is true for most owners, regardless of what you're doing, especially if you're doing a lot of miles. And if you're buying a Model 3 for business and you're doing a lot of miles, charging is going to be on your agenda. So I'm in my Tesla right now. I'm on a supercharger. I'm charging my vehicle. Now, the great thing about this is that regardless of where I am in the UK, I can always plot my journey and the car will tell me where I need to charge. So this is the supercharger that I'm at the moment. This is the one that's close to where I basically live. But if you zoom out, you'll start to see additional red dots. And these additional dots are all superchargers. And I cannot stress the importance of this because when you buy an EV, if you are going to be worried about whether you're going to be able to charge your car or not, then this network is going to give you comfort. Because if you look at the number of red dots that you have here, which are supercharging stations exclusively for Tesla owners, you start to realize that there are a lot of facilities available across the countries which make buying an EV more sustainable. Now, this is just the UK. If I zoom out into Europe, as you can see, there are a lot of superchargers across Europe. Even if you go all the way up to Norway and even over to Sweden, there are a lot of supercharging stations. They have invested heavily for the benefit of Tesla customers to be able to charge. Now, if you don't own a Tesla and you buy an EV, what you have to do is essentially rock up to places like this, for example, where they have other charging facilities for cars that are not Teslas. And let me be honest, I come here quite often, and often we will see a non-Tesla try to park up to one of these superchargers and try and charge the vehicle. But the chargers are proprietary. They will only charge Teslas. And therefore, we often get into conversations with people as to they didn't quite know that the network wasn't quite there to support other brands like Porsche, BMW, Audi, so on and so forth.
Now, to be fair, if you do drive electric and you don't have a Tesla, there are apps that you can use to help you locate charging stations. Apps like ChargeCar, Shell Recharge, PodPoint, and ZapMap, especially ZapMap, are common ones that people use. However, the infrastructure needs to be invested in. Oftentimes when you go to any of the charging stations that these apps will point you to, oftentimes there are only 2 outlets. So you can only charge 2 cars at the same time. And that's going to be a real problem as we move towards EV in the next 10 to 20 years. Unlike Tesla superchargers, where you can have a stack of 8, a stack of 10, you've got some locations here in the UK with a stack of 16, meaning that you can have 16 Teslas all charging at the same time. We need to invest in the infrastructure. And I think as retail investors, that may be a good opportunity to start seeking out to invest in this investment, this building out of the charging infrastructure for what is going to be inevitable in the next 10 to 20 years.
Elon's been very, very forward thinking, really. And he has prepared the road for this. Where the battle is going to be won, and I think where most other manufacturers are focusing on, is battery technology. Can you get a battery that can store a large amount of energy to give you the range that you want? So I personally believe that once you start getting to about 500 to 600 miles per charge, the need for this supercharger network may reduce. But the question is going to be, how affordable can you make that vehicle at 500 to 600 miles range? I think moving into the future, we will see that come along, but who's going to be there first? I think when it comes to battery technology and it comes to technology for EVs as a whole, Tesla has the march on everybody. The consensus is that they are 3 to 5 years ahead of their nearest competitor. So if anybody's going to get to a battery that is going to offer 500 to 600 miles range, I think personally that Tesla will do it first. I could be wrong. That's my belief. Obviously, we're talking about Tesla here. I'm sat in a Tesla at a Tesla supercharger. I'm a Tesla investor. I'm clearly a Tesla bull. So maybe I'm a little bit biased in having this conversation and actually discussing this, but is what I truly believe, having had this car for such a long time and knowing that this car has never, ever, ever put a foot wrong, apart from breaking down once when the 12-volt battery actually went and needed replacing, but you would have that with any car. The strategic advantage that Tesla has over their competitors, I believe, is what's going to drive them moving forward, because this game is all about car sales. It's about producing cars. It's about selling those cars. At the moment, they have a supply versus demand problem. They have too much demand for the supply. They have to ramp up production. That's the biggest challenge that they're facing right now. That's what Elon is working on. But in terms of strategic advantages that will spur those sales on into the future, the supercharging network like this that I'm saying at right now is going to make a huge difference, in my opinion. That's how we're going to see the share price go to $3,000, according to Cathie Woods and her predictions for the business. I don't know whether you agree. I'm sure that there will be some people who are very, very passionate in telling me that I'm wrong. Let's have that conversation in the comment section. Catch you later on.